I didn't know I was making the biggest decision of my life. I just didn't want to eat alone. That's the part that still messes with my head. People think life-changing moments feel big, loud, dramatic. Mine smelled like soggy cafeteria fries and chocolate milk. It was the second week of 11th grade when I first saw him. Not noticed him. Saw him. He was sitting on the concrete behind the gym, back against the brick wall, knees pulled to his chest like he was trying to fold himself smaller. Like if he took up less space, the world might ignore him less aggressively. Our school was the kind where social status was a currency, and everyone knew the exchange rate. Athletes were gold. Pretty girls were silver. Nerds were acceptable if they were useful. Everyone else? Invisible. He was beyond invisible. His hoodie was too thin for October. Sleeves frayed. Shoes duct-taped at the sides. Hair like he cut it himself in a mirror that hated him. Kids didn't bully him. That would have required acknowledging he existed. They just avoided the space around him like he carried a contagious kind of poverty. I remember standing by the vending machines, holding my lunch tray, watching from a distance. He wasn't begging. Wasn't looking at anyone. Just staring at the ground like it owed him answers. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the way he kept pretending not to shiver. Maybe it was because I'd just had a fight with my friends and didn't want to sit at our usual table pretending everything was fine. Or maybe, and this is the truth I didn't admit until years later, I saw loneliness in him that looked too much like my own. So I walked over. Every step felt louder than it should have. Kids glanced up, whispered. Not loud enough to hear words, but loud enough to feel judgment pressing into my back. I stopped a few feet from him. "Hey," I said. He didn't look up. I almost turned around. But I didn't. I hate eating in the cafeteria. It smells like wet socks. Mind if I sit here? That got his attention. He looked up slowly, like he was bracing for a joke. His eyes were dark. Tired in a way teenagers shouldn't be. "You don't want to sit here," he said quietly. "I already am," I replied and sat down. Up close, I could see how thin he was. Not skipped breakfast thin. Not diet culture thin. Empty thin. I opened my lunchbox. Turkey sandwich. Apple slices. Granola bar. Juice box. Brownie. He looked away instantly, like even seeing food was something he wasn't allowed to do. I broke the sandwich in half and held one piece out. I can't eat a whole one. My mom packs like I'm training for the Olympics. He hesitated. "I'm not." "Please," I said. "Otherwise I'll just throw it away. And that feels like a crime." That did it. Slowly, like he expected someone to jump out and yell psych, he took it. He didn't say thank you. He didn't need to. The way he ate, carefully like every bite had to last, said everything. "What's your name?" I asked. He swallowed before answering. "Daniel." "I'm Mia." We ate in silence after that. But it wasn't awkward. It was calm. For the first time that week, my brain stopped buzzing with drama and expectations and social politics. It was just two people sitting on cold concrete, sharing a sandwich like it was the most normal thing in the world. The next day, I brought 2 sandwiches. I told myself it was no big deal. Just extra bread. Just kindness. Nothing more. But when I walked behind the gym and saw he wasn't there, my stomach dropped in a way that didn't make sense. I almost left. Then I spotted him by the dumpsters, trying to stay out of sight. I held up the lunch bag. He walked over. Didn't smile. But his shoulders dropped just a little. That became our routine. Every day, behind the gym. Every day, shared lunch. At first we barely talked. Then little things slipped out. He liked math. Hated English. Worked evenings, helping a guy from church. Never mentioned parents. Never mentioned home. I didn't push. I just showed up. One afternoon it rained. Hard. Cold. Miserable rain that soaked through everything. I ran behind the gym anyway, clutching the paper bag under my jacket. He was there. No hoodie. Just a thin t-shirt, drenched, arms wrapped around himself. "Daniel." I rushed over. "Why didn't you go inside?" He shrugged. "Not allowed to hang out in the halls during lunch if you don't have a club or team." I didn't know that. Or maybe I did, and it just never applied to people like me. I pulled off my jacket and shoved it at him. Put this on. No. Yes. You'll be cold. I live 5 minutes away. I'll survive. That was a lie. I took the bus. But he didn't argue again. That was the first time he smiled. Small. Quick. Like a reflex he wasn't used to. It changed his whole face. And something in my chest tightened in a way I didn't have words for yet. Weeks turned into months. Winter came. I started forgetting gloves and beanies that just happened to fit him. He started waiting for me. If I was late, he'd be pacing. If I was early, he'd already be there. We never exchanged numbers. Never hung out outside school. It was like our friendship existed in a bubble behind the gym, sealed off from the rest of the world. And honestly, I liked it that way. No drama. No expectations. Just us. Then one day he didn't show up. I waited. Bell rang. Still nothing. The next day? Nothing. By the third day, panic started creeping in. I asked the teacher if Daniel was sick. She frowned. Daniel who? Daniel. I realized I didn't know his last name. I checked the yearbook. Nothing. No Daniel that looked like him. It was like he'd vanished. I spent weeks scanning every hallway, every corner of the cafeteria. No tapetchus. No hoodie. Just empty space where he used to sit. I told myself he transferred. Moved away. Anything but the darker possibilities my brain kept whispering at 2 a.m. Eventually, life swallowed the space he left. Graduation. College. Jobs. Adult responsibilities that don't care about unfinished stories. But every time I saw someone sitting alone, every time I packed too much food, every time I noticed someone pretending they weren't hungry, I thought of him. I hoped desperately that somewhere, somehow, he was warm. Safe. Okay. 10 years later, I walked into my office on a Monday morning with coffee in one hand and my laptop bag sliding off my shoulder. I worked at a mid-sized tech consulting firm in the city. Nothing glamorous. Just spreadsheets, deadlines, and pretending I understood corporate buzzwords. There was a buzz in the air. People whispering. Straightening their desks. New regional director starts today, my co-worker Jenna whispered as I sat down. Big deal. Apparently he turned around 3 failing branches in 2 years. Cool. I muttered, logging in. I didn't care about upper management. Upper management didn't know my name. At 10 a.m., we all got called into the conference room. I grabbed my notebook and followed the herd. The room was packed. Then the door opened. And my world tilted. He walked in wearing a tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, watch that probably cost more than my car. Confident posture. Calm eyes. Older. Stronger. But those eyes. I knew those eyes. My pen slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the table. He scanned the room. Professional smile. Then his gaze landed on me. And froze. For half a second, the corporate mask cracked. Shock. Recognition. Something deeper. Then it was gone, replaced with composure. Good morning, he said smoothly. I'm Daniel Reyes. I'll be overseeing this region moving forward. The room blurred. Sound faded. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. Daniel Reyes. Not invisible. Not hungry. Not lost. Standing at the front of the room as my new boss. And looking at me like I was the last piece of a puzzle he'd been trying to solve for 10 years. If this opening hit you already, you are not ready for what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed because this is where the past comes back. And secrets I never knew he was keeping start to unravel. I don't remember the rest of that meeting. I know I was physically there. I nodded when others nodded. Wrote down words that made no sense later. Synergy, quarterly alignment, strategic restructuring. But my brain? My brain was behind a gym in 11th grade, holding half a sandwich out to a boy who looked like he might disappear if I blinked too long. Daniel. My Daniel. Except he wasn't mine. And he definitely wasn't the quiet, half-starved kid I used to sit with on freezing concrete. He was in charge now. Of me. After the meeting ended, everyone crowded around him, eager to impress the new boss. Firm handshakes. Corporate laughs. LinkedIn energy in human form. I stayed seated. I couldn't move. Because I knew. I knew the second we were alone, the past was going to come rushing back, and I wasn't sure I was ready to meet it as an adult. Mia. My name, spoken in a voice deeper than I remembered, but carrying the same quiet steadiness. I looked up. Everyone else had cleared out. It was just us in the conference room. 10 years of unanswered questions standing between two chairs. You remember me, he said. It wasn't a question. I swallowed. Daniel. His jaw tightened slightly, like hearing his name from me still meant something. I didn't know if you would, he admitted. Are you kidding? I let out a shaky breath. You vanished. I thought you were dead. A flicker crossed his face. Yeah, he said softly. I get that a lot. We just stood there for a moment, both trying to figure out how to talk when the last conversation we'd had involved apple slices and cafeteria milk. You look, I gestured vaguely, different. He huffed a quiet laugh. That's one word for it. I wanted to ask everything at once. Where did you go? Why didn't you say goodbye? Were you safe? Did anyone take care of you? Instead, what came out was, you're my boss. Unfortunately, he said. I was hoping you'd work somewhere less awkward. Despite everything, I laughed. The tension cracked just enough for air to get in. We didn't talk much more that day. He had executive meetings. I had reports to finish. But I felt his presence in the building like static electricity. Every time my email notification pinged, my heart jumped, expecting his name. It came at 4:37 p.m. From Daniel Reyes. Subject: coffee? Just one word. Like he knew we didn't need more. I stared at it for a full minute before replying. Sure. We met at a cafe across the street after work. Not corporate. Not fancy. Just warm lighting, soft music, and the smell of espresso thick in the air. For a second, standing there awkwardly by the counter, it felt like we were kids again. Two people outside the world's expectations. Then he paid for both drinks with a black card that probably had a higher credit limit than my annual salary, and reality snapped back. We sat by the window. Traffic blurred past outside. Inside, time folded in on itself. You first, I said. You disappeared. He nodded slowly, like he'd been rehearsing this moment for years. My mom died that winter. The words hit like a dropped plate. I blinked. I didn't even know you. Had one, he finished. Yeah. Most people didn't. He stared into his coffee. She was sick. Long time. Didn't have insurance. Didn't tell anyone how bad it was because she was afraid they'd take me away. I felt my throat tighten. So when she got really bad, I stopped coming to school. Took care of her. Worked more hours. Tried to keep the apartment. How old were you? 16. 16. I was worried about prom dresses and math tests. He was trying to keep someone alive. She passed in February, he continued. Landlord didn't wait long. We were behind on rent for months. I had 2 weeks before we got evicted. My chest ached. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. He looked up at me then, and there it was, that old guarded look. What was I supposed to say? Hey Mia, thanks for the sandwiches. Also my life is collapsing. Wanna fix that too? That's not fair. I know, he said gently. But it's the truth. You were the only normal thing I had. I didn't want to turn you into survival. I didn't know whether to cry or be angry. So what happened? I found a number in one of my mom's old notebooks. My uncle. We hadn't talked in years. I called. He wired enough money for a bus ticket to Texas. Texas. He nodded. He owned a construction company. Put me to work. Long hours. But he made sure I finished high school. You just left. I wrote you a note. I froze. What? I left it in your locker the day we got evicted. My locker had been vandalized that week, broken latch, stuff missing. I thought it was random. I never got it, I said quietly. His shoulders fell, like a decade-old weight just settled heavier. I waited for you behind the gym that last day, he admitted. In the rain. Thought maybe you'd come. I had been homesick. 2 parallel tragedies missing each other by inches. We sat with that for a long time. 2 lives that split without goodbye. You didn't just survive, I said eventually, gesturing at his suit, his watch, the quiet confidence. You won. He smiled faintly. Depends how you define winning. He told me about night classes, scholarships, sleeping 4 hours a night for years, learning finance from YouTube, getting mentored by a professor who saw something in him. I kept thinking, he said, if I could just get stable enough, I'd come back, find you, say thank you properly. My heart skipped. You remembered me that whole time? He gave me a look like the question offended him. Mia, you fed me when you didn't have to. You sat with me when nobody else would even look at me. You treated me like a person when I felt like a ghost. His voice softened. You don't forget the person who reminds you you're human. I had to look away before he saw my eyes fill. Then he said something that shifted the air. I looked for you, you know. I turned back. What? After college. I came back here for a conference. Went to the school. Records office wouldn't give me your info. Privacy laws. So how did you? LinkedIn, he said with a small smile. Took years. But when your name popped up on an employee list during acquisition research last quarter. You already knew I worked there? I said, stunned. He nodded. I didn't take this job just for career growth. The cafe suddenly felt smaller, warmer, charged. You came here because of me? Partly, he admitted. I wanted to see you again. Make sure you were okay. My brain short-circuited trying to process the idea that someone had carried my memory like a compass for 10 years. That's a lot, I said. Yeah, he agreed softly. We talked for hours. About everything we'd missed. College disasters. Bad roommates. First heartbreaks. Jobs we hated before landing here. But under all of it was something unspoken. A thread that had started with half a sandwich and never really snapped. When the cafe lights dimmed for closing, neither of us had touched the deeper question hanging between us. Why did this still feel like something more than nostalgia? We walked outside together. Cold air. City lights reflecting in wet pavement. I'm glad you're okay, I said. He studied my face like he was memorizing it again. I'm more than okay, he said. And a big part of that started with you. My stomach flipped. He stepped a little closer, then hesitated, like a man used to taking risks in business, but suddenly unsure how to move in matters of the heart. I don't want to rush this, he said carefully. But I also don't want to pretend this is just coincidence. My pulse thudded in my ears. Me neither, I admitted. We stood there in the quiet hum of the city, both realizing that the story we thought ended behind a high school gym had just turned the page. And neither of us knew what the next chapter was going to cost. If you think this is just a sweet reunion story, you are very wrong. Now, the truth about why Daniel never reached out sooner, and the secret he's been carrying since high school, changes everything between us. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the final part. The days after our cafe meeting were surreal. Daniel and I returned to our offices, pretending like everything was normal, but the air between us had shifted. Every glance, every shared email, even the slightest hallway encounter was charged. I kept reminding myself, this is my boss. This is professional. But my heart refused to listen. He started dropping subtle hints. Not overtly romantic. Nothing that could get him in trouble at work, but moments only I would catch. The way he always asked if I wanted to grab lunch during a hectic day. How he remembered my coffee order. How he would pause for a second longer than necessary when I mentioned something personal, just to make sure I wasn't hurt or stressed. I couldn't deny it. I was falling fast. And then one Thursday evening, everything changed. The office had emptied out except for us. I was staying late to finish a report, and Daniel had come in after a meeting that ran over. I thought we'd exchange polite nods and continue our work. Instead, he leaned against the corner of my desk, casually, as if the weight of the world could be ignored, and said, Mia, do you remember the day I sat next to you in the cafeteria with half a sandwich? I smiled faintly, trying not to let my heart betray me. Of course. I never forgot you. Neither did I, he said softly. The silence that followed was thick, comfortable yet terrifying. Then he straightened, walking around the desk and kneeling slightly in a movement so unexpected that my breath caught. My brain didn't even process at first. Before I could even react, He opened a small velvet box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, something I could imagine my mother or grandmother wearing. Timeless, understated, yet perfect. "I waited 10 years to see you again," he said, his voice trembling slightly, which was rare for the Daniel who commanded boardrooms with a single glance. "I waited 10 years hoping that one day I could tell you this properly. Mia, will you marry me?" Time slowed. Everything I thought I knew about fate, chance, and the cruel randomness of life converged in that moment. The boy I had once given a half-eaten sandwich to, the boy who had survived hardships I couldn't have imagined, was now kneeling before me, asking for a future together. Not because of our past, though our past had brought us here, but because he wanted to build something real with me, starting from today. I couldn't speak at first. My mind was a chaotic storm. Relief, disbelief, joy, fear, exhilaration. 10 years of separation, of wondering what became of him, all distilled into this one impossible, beautiful act. "Yes," I finally whispered. And that was when I realized, the kindness I had shown that day in high school, which I thought was insignificant, had rippled through time and transformed both of our lives. That small gesture had altered the course of history, our history. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Office gossip spread slowly at first. Daniel and I were careful, never flaunting our relationship. But it wasn't long before whispers reached our colleagues. "The new boss and the rising star in marketing are unusually close." It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. Every day, I would look at him across the office, and the memory of that high school cafeteria, that forgotten half sandwich, would anchor my heart, reminding me that this was always meant to happen, in some way. We spent weekends together, exploring the city, sharing stories we'd never told anyone else, laughing about our high school awkwardness, crying about the losses and hardships that had shaped us. I discovered layers of him I could never have imagined. The depth of his compassion, the intensity of his focus, the gentle humor that only surfaced when he was truly comfortable. And then came the first family introductions. Daniel's parents were warm but formal. Mine were stunned. The idea that the boy I had once helped as a high schooler had become my life partner was almost too surreal for them. But when they saw us together, the way we moved through the world, the laughter, the tenderness, they realized this wasn't a fling. This was destiny. Months passed. Engagement planning began. Not the glitzy, celebrity-level chaos you might imagine, but a careful, intentional weaving together of two lives that had once been fragmented. Daniel insisted on including the homeless shelter where we had first met in high school. He wanted to give back, to honor the moment that had started it all. We visited the shelter together, donating time, resources, and mentoring the kids there. I watched him interact with them, and it was like seeing the boy I had once helped transformed into a man who remembered the small kindnesses that shaped him. It made me fall in love with him even more. One evening, as we were walking home from the shelter, he took my hand and said softly, "Mia, do you realize that without you I wouldn't be here? I wouldn't have survived my worst years. You were my first hope, my first light." I squeezed his hand, fighting tears. "And you were mine. I had no idea back then, but now I understand. We were shaping each other all along." He smiled, pulling me close. "And now we get to shape our future." The wedding was intimate, filled with family, friends, and colleagues who had watched our story unfold in whispers and in awe. But the highlight of the day was the quiet moment before the ceremony, when Daniel handed me a small, wrapped package. Inside was the half-eaten sandwich from high school, preserved carefully. "Never forget," he whispered, "the day everything began." I laughed through tears, holding it gently. A symbol of our past, yes, but also a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can change destinies. As we exchanged vows, promising to support, honor, and love each other for the rest of our lives, I realized that the homeless boy I had once fed had not only returned but had brought with him a love so deep, so profound, that it healed a decade of uncertainty, fear, and longing. Now, as I sit at my desk in our shared office, planning our next charitable project together, I sometimes glance at the framed photo of that high school cafeteria. A younger me, handing half a sandwich to a boy who seemed invisible to the world. And I smile, because that small act of kindness became the anchor, the bridge, and the foundation of a love story I will tell for the rest of my life. If you love this story and believe in the power of small acts changing lives, hit subscribe, share this video, and join us for more incredible true life stories that will touch your heart and keep you watching until the very end. You never know, the next story could change your life too.